Okay, so today I want to go over how to structure your research paper and kind of go over the information I gave to you in class. And so this will give you an opportunity to listen to it again and perhaps hear things that you maybe didn't hear in class. So most of you are at this point where you're taking your research question and you're turning it into a thesis, a working thesis that is. Again, you'll probably tweak it a little bit, but it's a place to start. So obviously all of you have created a research question. You have done a significant amount of research, at least you should have at this point. So the next step is, of course, creating that working thesis. First you have to, before you take that step, evaluate all the research that you've done. You've got to make sure that you're really listening to what the research is telling you. And it will tell you what direction you need to take. Obviously, you've had an open-ended question and you sought out the answers. Now you have to listen to those answers. Again, if you do this, this should help you determine your working thesis. So here's an example. So in a hypothetical paper, if your research topic was food production and the consumer, you might have come up with a question like, how are food producers regulated and are they effective in protecting consumers? So in my hypothetical example, this is what I would have researched. I would have gathered all the information to help me answer that question. Then I would take all that information, lay it out and say, okay, what have I learned, right? So my third point here is, in the hypothetical paper, after researching, I would have determined that the consumer protections are not effective. And so when I determined that, my thesis then became regulatory governmental bodies that are meant to protect American food consumers are ineffective. Now, going back to bullet point 3, my research could have led me in a different direction. It could have easily said, hey, they're super effective, whatever. But that's not what I discovered, Obviously, that would have changed my thesis. You've got to listen to the research. So my suggestion first is to map out the plan. Now, one of the things I want you to look at is on this card I'm holding up here is this is all about content. You want to organize your content first. Below there, I've put this phrase, know who's going to live in the house before you build it. And what I mean by that is, if you're building a custom home, you need to think about how many people are going to be living here. Is grandma going to come live with us? How many bathrooms do we need? All those sorts of pieces of information you've got to figure out before you build that house. And so before you can even map out a structural plan, you've got to figure out who's going to live there, and how that relates to your paper is what content are you going to need to discuss. So this is where we start out. Okay, so we've made that working thesis, and we are going to figure out, do we need more information? Do we have enough? And my second point here is don't underestimate the value of this. This, I really truthfully believe, will save you a lot of time and frustration and stress in the writing process if you do these pre-writing activities. And I think overall it saves you time. Even though it feels like you're doing extra steps, I think on the back end, when you are actually in the writing process, it'll be so much more smooth in terms of how you are able to kind of spit out your paper. All right, so let's take a look at this particular graphic here. So again, you don't have to have 4 claims. You don't have to have 3 claims. You don't have to have 6 claims. But for the example here, I have 4 claims. All right, your information is going to tell you how many claims you need. Notice the working thesis statement would go in the middle, and then you'd figure out, okay, how many claims am I going to have, and what kinds of evidence and sources help me to fulfill those claims. So remember my hypothetical thesis, right, for my hypothetical paper? Here is how this might look. Okay, I've put my working thesis here in the middle, And then I've mapped out, after looking at all the evidence, that I really have only 3 claims that I want to talk about. I want to talk about claim 1, which is basically public policy. The U.S. food policies protect large food producers. And then I want to talk about the second claim, where regulators failed to effectively safeguard the health and welfare of Americans. And then the third claim is the U.S. government has not advocated policies that support environmental sustainability. So those are my 3 claims. Now, when you look at this, you might say, oh, that means she's going to have 3 body paragraphs. Absolutely not. This is just, again, looking at content. I can't emphasize this enough. This would be several paragraphs. This would be several paragraphs. And this would be several paragraphs. I just want to try to see first how to approach it. Now, just to take a step back for a second, some of you may want to do your claims before your working thesis. In this case, I've modeled for you. I made my working thesis, then I came up with my claims. You might want to start out with create 3 claims and then figure out your working thesis. Both ways are equally effective. It's whatever works best for you. So now you're going to have to plot your evidence, okay? You've got your claims. Now let's take a look at your evidence. So let's take a look, just for our model purposes, at my hypothetical claim 1. So that's that green section here. So here it is in linear format. We have claim 1, the U.S. public food policies protect large food producers. So here I've shown you that I want to talk about public policy. These are the different 4 points that I want to mention. In parentheses, I've listed where I'm going to get those sources from, or that information from, and what sources. And now, obviously, these are all class sources. You're going to have some of your own sources in here as well, but this is just a model. I'm going to continue to do that for all my claims. So, and just look at this from a graphic perspective. I've mapped out claim 1, I've mapped out claim 2, I've mapped out claim 3. And notice, I'm just talking about content right now. I'm just figuring out who's going to live in my house before I build my house. Because I want to tailor, kind of make my structure based off of the content that I need to include. Again, I don't want to be driven by a structure that does not serve my content, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so I'm just going to take a little time out here, show you, again, go to my website, completes the thesis, argument, and claims Google form. You can look in on my website or and look in the research paper exit task. I've also emailed it to you through NGrade. I'm not going to go there right now, but there is, if you're looking at the actual PowerPoint that I've also put, which is this PowerPoint, which I also put on my website, this particular link will take you right through it. All right, so now you're looking at your map and you say, oh my gosh, I need more evidence for my claim 2, whatever. That's when you kind of take a step back, figure out what you need to edit out, what's not really working. Okay, so now it comes to the outline. Now, the outline is all about structure. So, see on that card? So, first we did content, now we're doing structure. So, after you know who's going to live in the house, then you build, right? You don't want to build a house that will only house 4 people if there are 10 people in your family, right? So, we want to make sure and figure out that content first. So how do I do that? Okay, would be the question. Well, unfortunately, there's no one way to approach the paper, but there are some general rules that you can follow. So that's what I kind of want to talk about right now. I want to show you some examples that you can apply to your own paper and, make it fit your needs. So first, this particular layout is all about fewer claims and more subclaims, all right? So this kind of goes with the model that I have shown you for my working thesis and my working claims. All right, so this is in columns, so we'll lift it on the left and then we'll go over to the right. So you can see here, obviously we're going to have an introduction, then you're going to have claim 1. Now notice I've got 4 subclaims. I also, for my subclaim 3, I have a pretty important counter-argument and rebuttal I want to discuss. So therefore, again, you can plug this any way you want, this counter-argument. You may not even have a counter-argument. See over here, I don't have a counter-argument here. It's to insert your counter-argument rebuttal where you think it fits into your paper. Notice in this case, I have 3 points in this paper that I'm going to introduce a counter-argument and rebuttal. Remember, this is not an extra thing you have to do. This is an actual writing strategy to help you articulate your point and prove your argument or your thesis, right? This is a way in which you can develop your paper in a more meaningful way so that the reader gets a better view of what you're trying to say, and also is perhaps swayed by your argument a little bit more because you've included all aspects and dialogue related to this topic. So keep that in mind. Now, each one of these claims is probably going to be a different paragraph. I'm probably going to combine the subclaim and claim into one paragraph. This is going to be a separate paragraph. I'll probably include the counter argument here with the subclaim 3, and then this would be an additional paragraph. That's one way to do it. I could also, again, combine these two. Then this would be a separate paragraph. This would be a separate paragraph, and this would be a separate paragraph, and then 4. So you have to decide, am I going to include it in with the subclaim, or am I going to pull it out? One of the questions you have to ask yourself is it a more involved counter-argument and rebuttal? Because I don't want this paragraph to be pages long, right? So I may need to separate it out, and that's where your writer's eye comes in. And you have to think about your reader, because if you go drone on and on and on and on, you're going to lose them. So it may behoove you to insert a separate paragraph. Again, case by case. Here, you can see that I have 2 counter arguments. This would probably be a paragraph. Maybe I'd combine these. That would be a second paragraph. These would be combined here. And then here, these would be combined, and then this would be separated out. If you combined this, doesn't mean you can't pull this one out, right? Doesn't mean you have to combine this one. Or if you separate this one out, doesn't mean you have to separate this one out, right? You need to decide what works well for each subclaim. All right. And then, of course, you're going to go through them all and then a conclusion. Now, that might be, oh my gosh, I don't have that many subclaims. I'm in disaster zone. This is going to not work out for me. You may want to look at it this way, if that's kind of what you're thinking. This is more claims, fewer subclaims. And this might appeal to you more. Again, these are options. These are I'm speaking in generalities. So again, you've got to kind of make it specific to your particular topic. All right, so here we have the introduction again, no problem. Now we have 5 claims, and then we have fewer subclaims. You can see here I have 2, 2, 1, 2, and 1, okay? And you can also see where I've inserted the counter argument. As I said in the previous outline, the same situation applies here. This may be one paragraph, this may be another paragraph, and this may be a third paragraph. Or I might combine this one and these together for 2 paragraphs for claim 1. So it depends on what works, and you can vary your approach from claim to claim. And then, of course, we've got our conclusion. All right, so let's look at a few examples of how a paragraph might look. Of course, you as the writer must determine how your paper will be best served. Okay, so we're ready to write. All right, so introduction, pretty straightforward. This is things that we've seen before. Again, you want to think about the general statement and background of the topic, an overview of the claims that you're going to discuss, of course, your argument, and then Some of the tips or techniques that we talked about. Meta commentary, right? We said that would be really effective. That meta text helps the reader understand specifically what to expect. Again, the templates